who you are, what you do.
We are going live. 1 second.
There's always a bit of a lag, isn't there, Lisa?
There is always a bit of a lag.
I supported my local coffee shop and went to get a takeaway coffee.
Hold on. Okay, I need to. Okay, great.
Thank you so much, Lisa. Good morning, good afternoon, everybody. Once again, it's Friday. We're coming to the end of what, from our point of view in Family Voice, has been an amazing week where we've been able to connect with so many different people in this whole new way. I want to take the opportunity just here to thank my team in the background who've been just astounding. But I'm absolutely thrilled to welcome 3 members of the Scias team from Surrey County Council, who particularly work with young people with SEND to get their views, I think. But rather than me tell you what it is they do and get it undoubtedly wrong, we've got Sabrina, Rowan and Gemma. Shall I say hello and let you introduce yourselves and tell us a little bit more?
Sure, let's go for it. So my name is Sabrina Peters. I am the new SEND Participation Officer for the User Voice and Participation team. I kind of lead on all of the SEND work that we're doing and help with running one of our youth participation groups, SYAS, which stands for SEND Youth Advisors Surrey. Currently, the young people in the group are talking about renaming the group, completely rebranding it, self-describing, and just some really powerful ideas that they have. And here to talk about the kind of young person perspective on that, we have Rowan, who is one of our SIAS members. If you'd like to introduce yourself.
Hi, my name's Rowan. I work within the team as a user voice participation, bank user voice and participation officer, but I also still attend SIAS because I'm still a young person. So I try to, I still have the same opinions as I did before I joined. So I still attend, and it's lovely to be here.
And I'm Gemma Neathie, so I'm also a participation officer within the team. I've recently come back from maternity leave, having only started this role shortly before I went on maternity leave, so still finding my feet a bit, but my focus is going to be kind of more towards education within the team, getting young people's views heard around that, hence why we have the alternative learning provision surveys, which we'll talk a bit more about later. So yeah, that's me.
Brilliant, thank you so much, and congratulations. Little girl or little boy, dare I ask?
Little girl, she's wonderful. Yeah, 13 months already, crazy.
Congratulations to you. I was really interested, so I think it's really important for us to tell our members that Family Voice have been working increasingly closely with your team in various ways, because actually there's a lot of overlap to what we do, even though we have different roles. One of the things that I was really, we agreed before we talked, but I'm going off script because I do that all the time. So what we're going to talk about a little bit is what SIAS have done and what their plans are to become more accessible, more broadly representative, and how to do that. And then we're going to spend some time talking about the alternative provision review, which I know that many of our members have a very, very vested interest in. So I think it's going to be really welcome. Thank you, Gemma. One of the things that I wondered if we could spend a tiny bit of time talking about, though, first, is when I was speaking to other members of the UVP team, I learned that one of the things that you do is provide a number of traineeships or apprenticeships for young people. And it sounds, Rowan, as that maybe you're benefiting from one of those schemes. I may well be completely wrong, but it's something that for me as a parent carer, to know that there's a team in Surrey County Council, although you sit in a slightly almost independent-y kind of way to a lot of things, it seems to me, that actually you're creating opportunities for young people with additional needs. And that felt really powerful. Who's the best person to talk about that?
I mean, I'm probably the best equipped, as I am.
Go for it, Ryan.
Yes, so actually I officially work on the care side of the team because I'm a care leaver. So there is a specific provision for bank workers because I have additional needs. I'm physically disabled, as well as kind of a couple of other different health needs, just all of them basically. So, but there's kind of ring fence funding. So because I can't always work reliably, because if I have to go to hospital last minute because I get really sick, or if, you know, I'm genuinely unable to sit up that day, then obviously I won't be attending anything. So having that job for me is really fantastic, because obviously, you know, it's paid work for me, which honestly I probably would not be able to access otherwise. And I found, you know, not to like hype up my employer, but they have been really, really fantastic in terms of accessibility. I don't think there is another job I could do, simply because this team is so willing to work around me, which I need, because, you know, at the same time as I, you know, absolutely love my job and will strive to be there whenever I can, sometimes I just have to disappear last minute. And so it's really fantastic to have a service and to have an employer that is willing to work around me that way, and to have that opportunity provided for me, because it's I probably would not be in paid work otherwise.
You know, I keep on doing this in these talks. Is I'm here obviously as operations lead for Family Voice, but like everybody in Family Voice, I'm a parent carer, and it feels like I'm talking to my daughter, Rowan, which is, you know, one of the things that my parent brain is going, I really have to get my kids to look into Scias, because actually there's a lot that they can give, but there may well be some things on offer for them that will help them, and trying in this preparation for adulthood world to empower them to live their own lives rather than be dependent on me to find opportunities and things feels so important. And isn't it wonderful, you know, as parent carers in the SEND world, often we experience the council and the local authority as a place of conflict and confrontation. To hear that actually for our young people, there are opportunities within that same organisation that are so positive. I think that's going to be a really powerful thing to hear. So thank you so much. I thank you. I'm really pleased that I've got that in, because that kind of made me zing. Thank you very much. Sabrina, can I ask you maybe about, you know, we were talking about the plans that you have for Scias, and you mentioned there are some changes. Maybe would it be worth starting with kind of how long it's been going and what it looks like now, and then how you're hoping to move things?
Definitely. So Scias has been around for 4 years, actually. It's changed a lot over that time. Rowan has actually been in Scias since the beginning. So if you really want an idea of how it's changed, so Rowan can say quite a lot about that. But I think for what Scias really want to do is to be representative of SEND needs in Surrey, and we want to get as many people involved in whichever way they want to be involved or can be involved in. And that's not just in giving your feedback, but we also, you know, we have young people writing our blogs. We're going to be starting a podcast, and members of Scias are getting involved in that and developing content, and it's going to be recorded and be in the podcast. They're going to interview us about the roles that we do. We're going to try and invite guest speakers in, and just, you know, just find things out that Scias want to know in a really accessible way. And obviously whatever podcast we do, there will be a transcript available as well. That will be screen reader accessible. We want to provide as much information in as many different formats as possible. I think one of the problems that we've had thus far is that we don't have a communications officer at the moment. So we're trying to do everything on top of our own jobs. That makes sense. So, and there is a little bit.
That's what we do at Family Voice all the time. It is the standard operating method.
Yeah. So right now, I think a lot of information has been coming out in images, but that is going to change. That is one of the reasons I am here, and we'll slowly be updating the website, but also we'll be taking the website and everything that we do back to Scias regularly and saying, is this enough? What else do you want? What do we need to do? Do you want to do it? Well, how can we facilitate that if it's something that you want to do yourselves? Just kind of really embrace the meaning of participation, and rather than us just bringing content to Scias, like this is what you'll be doing, just letting Scias choose. Like we do have a lot of consultation work that comes in for Scias, really short term, and sometimes people give us like 2 days or something to get back to them. And this is something we're going to be changing as well. You know, Scias should be setting their own agendas, and consultation work that comes in shouldn't be pushing that out the way, if that makes sense. So we're going to be saying, we're going to be making a form that people have to fill in and be like, SYAS will meet on these days to discuss this consultation work, and you will need to submit it in advance.
It's really interesting, Sabrina, because this is exactly the kind of conversations that Family Voice have. And one of the things that we've been working on is making sure that we understand what the other is doing, because so many of those consultations are the same and they're seeking views along the same things. And actually, it makes an awful lot of sense for us to be talking together so that we don't inadvertently end up at strange cross purposes. But we have the same issues, but of trying to help those officers who are working on those strategic projects understand that, be it a young person with communication needs, for example, or a parent carer, prioritizing, we have such busy and complicated lives that as much as we might be really passionate about feeding into a consultation, we can't just drop everything. You know, if you've got a child that needs a series of medication or tube feeding or anything, you can't just shift those routines. If you've got a child on the autistic spectrum, you can't just disappear at a moment's notice. It has to be planned. And for the young people, I imagine that's all the more the case.
Definitely.
And I think a lot of it is about respecting the time and the views of young people as, you know, individuals rather than, you know, and very often young people are seen as things that can be moved about, you know, aren't always treated, in especially young people with SEND needs, you know, who aren't always given the independence that they deserve. So I think it's really important to respect the time and the effort that young people put into the work. And one of the ways to do that is to give young people time to involve co-production when we're doing participation, to make sure that we create these resources and create the projects that people would like to work on with young people, properly with young people, rather than coming in at the end and asking us for our feedback, because we're happy to do that. It's so important to make sure that, because often so many young people know a lot, they know things that are almost obvious to them. And especially as an autistic young person, I definitely find that. But, you know, so, and it's just perspective which is unique, and that professionals will struggle very, very hard to get automatically, whereas to a young person, it's intuitive. We will know because we have experienced the service. These are quality of life changes that don't require much thinking. You know, it just is so obvious to so many young people. And
isn't it can be so difficult, can't it, to fix something that started off just a little bit wrong, whereas actually if you get the beginning right, then everything slots into place. And I know
the work that is done is as effective as it can be.
So one of the things to let people know, I know that your team sits on a number of various strategic boards. Our team sits on some of the same ones, some different ones. And I think we each have, if we're talking and working well together, we're able to make sure that the other voice is heard in collaboration, in consonance with the other, rather than sometimes it can be, those two voices can be put into conflict with one another, which doesn't help anybody. Can I ask you, I know obviously, I think we all represent the same group of young people, don't we? It's young people aged 0 to 25 with any degree of additional need or disability. We at Family Voice work primarily with parent carers, although we occasionally have the privilege to work with young people, but that's not our remit. It's a kind of side thing, isn't it? But and we know obviously the parent carers themselves can have a variety of additional need. I wonder, how do you deal, because I think it's much harder for you, with the fact that you're going to have some of the young people you represent are going to have very complex medical and learning needs or be non-verbal, whereas at the other end you're going to have young people like Rowan, who's clearly incredibly articulate and intelligent and has that capacity to understand and explain. How do you manage that in terms of that accessibility?
So this is actually something we've been really struggling with during the COVID-19 restrictions, because before we would meet face to face, and therefore we were able to provide a lot more support than we are virtually. And we also have really good relationships with the parents and carers or guardians of the children and the young people that come to SYAS. So the plan that we have at the moment, obviously, currently we meet weekly with SYAS over Zoom, but Zoom is not accessible to everyone. And so we're trying to make SYAS as transparent as possible. So try and increase the number of pathways in which feedback can come. And we're wanting to start a few extra groups, which we think are really vital. So at the moment, SYAS is actually for 10 to 25-year-olds. We want to make more groups to be accessible to different ages, both physical ages and cognitive. Also, we want to get involved with young carers, siblings, family members of people with SEND to get the whole picture and talk to them about how do you want to give your feedback? How would participation work best for you, and what can we do to facilitate that for you? So this is definitely a big challenge for SYAS going forward, but we have lots of action plans in place, and we would really love people to get in contact with us, to follow our social media, so that when we put, you know, questions out there, we're getting that feedback so that we can do the right thing and do.
So I think one of the things that I must make sure, if I can get someone from your team to send us quickly the link to your Zoom sessions, and if we put them on the comment to this recording so that it's easily accessible for parents, I think that would be really good.
Well,
no, possibly
not. Before young people can join the Zoom sessions, they need to fill in a health and safety form and sign up. This is currently available as a Microsoft document which you can print off, or we have an online form which can be filled in, which has what's it called, Rowan? The
immersive reader.
Immersive reader option.
So which will read out the text to you to ensure that it's easier to access that. And I've experimented with it a bit, and it worked quite well. It's a feature offered by Microsoft, so it's a bit more accessible. And also, of course, you can change with any accessibility software that you already have built into your computer. You can always change the font, and it's all relatively accessible as yet. But if anyone has any improvements or difficulties, just let us know, and we will do whatever we can to improve the accessibility of it. Speaking in regards to your previous point, I think it's also important to remember that in a lot of individuals, disability is fluid.
Yeah.
You know, so someone can be, and I'm here in front of you speaking articulately, but there could be another day where I can't speak to you at all. You know, there are a lot of young people who experience, we have a young person who works in our participation groups who was non-verbal for quite a long period of time. And I think it's important to remember that disability is, you know, an incredibly fluid thing, because so many conditions are not static. Obviously, there are many that are, and we need to make sure that we accommodate, you know, properly and ensure that we meet accessibility should be a base requirement rather than something that a young person has to strive towards. But it's also just important to remember that even these young people who have, you know, non-verbal or who appear to have much more complex needs, with the right effort and time, it can be much, you know, and the right effort put in to provide that accessibility, that young person can access these services. We just need to make sure that we put in the time and effort they deserve so that they can do so. Because
you know, Rowan, I find in all of these talks, I find there's often a couple of key things where I think that's a nugget. And for me, in the talk we're having so far, one of them is your comment about disability being fluid. I think we're so used to talk about various different things being fluid, but actually, I don't think I know exactly what you mean. I experience it with my children, but I've never actually heard it, and I think it's worth repeating, isn't it? And you're really right. I think one of the things that I suppose I wanted to highlight is one of the things that we do at Family Voice is we work quite hard on making links with all kinds of organisations, especially in the voluntary sector, and I was really privileged last year to be invited to the launch of a communications toolkit the Disability Challengers had done. And it seemed to me that, you know, maybe one of the things that we can do together is make sure that those links are happening as well, so that we know that there are organisations in Surrey and people who are working really effectively with young people and who might have those skills and that ability to communicate with them, to make sure I don't think any of us has the capacity or the skills to reach everybody, do we? But if you look at all of the different places in Surrey and different organisations, if we could work really well together, then that gives us a much fuller picture, doesn't it?
It does, and I think that's something we're really trying to work on as a team, is to link with as many different areas of Surrey, but also not just as part of the county council, but charities as well, and lots of different. So we have I think there's some work we've done previously with like the police in terms of giving them the viewpoints of young people who, for example, get stopped and searched or end up in interacting with them for other reasons. Gemma at the moment actually is doing a lot of work on making web pages, our web pages in particular, more accessible, not only for SEND needs, but for young people in general. I mean, I think anyone who's looked on the Surrey CC website, Surrey County Council, will have something to say about it. And this is something we're very aware of. And, you know, unfortunately, these things take time, but it is happening. And there's certainly, since I've been here, and I've only been here since the 21st of September, and the number of contacts that we get is increasing day to day. And it's really great how many people just are so keen to get involved and to hear the young person's views.
Sorry, just had an important call come in.
It's fine, it's fine.
I think one of the things in that, so it's really lovely to have all of these new people coming in. Sorry, I feel old sometimes. I've been navigating Surrey as a local authority, as a parent carer for 13, 14 years with three young people now with additional needs. And I've been working with Family Voice for about 8 years or so. I think one of the things that is really hard to see as a member of the public is the changes that go on. And certainly I would say 2-3 years ago, the local authority, Surrey County Council, was where you went to get help. And it was a very, very separate entity. And what actually I've experienced, I think probably with Dave Hill coming in as Director for Children's Services, was a real push to think about Surrey as a community. And certainly now, the way that we seem to all be working, Family Voice Surrey is an independent organisation. The User Voice Participation Team, SYAS, are part of Surrey County Council. But actually what's happening is a much, much more integrated way of working. The charities that work with the youth of Surrey tend to be represented by a wonderful charity called Surrey Youth Focus. But through that, we're all making links with each other and working together in a way that I think 3-4 years ago simply wasn't happening. But it's a shift. And I think for us kind of in our day-to-day lives, that can feel really quite challenging because we've learned to trust a way of working that might not be comfortable or very effective, but that is the way that it is. And as a member of the public, you've not been privy to all of these subtle changes that have been quite quick in the scheme of things. And we're now asking parents to say, no, it's okay that you're being asked to talk to this charity rather than a local authority service. It's not them fobbing you off. It's just a different way of working. Yeah. It feels important to raise that and possibly to raise it repeatedly to actually get that message going.
Yeah, this is why.
We don't want to be seen as kind of that separate entity, the kind of the council, we've got to give the council our feedback kind of thing. We really, in particular our team, we really want to work with as many people as possible, and that's the only way we're going to get the breadth and depth of views that we need really to make a difference to our services.
I think it's also really sorry, can I just say this? I think it's also really important to point out that as a team, we are really diverse. We have a lot of diverse needs, and I think someone mentioned yesterday, I think our diversity index is like 38% or something, whereas across Surrey it's closer to 7 to 8%.
Yeah.
So a lot of the time when you're speaking to us, you'll be speaking to someone who also has an SEND need, someone from care, someone with mental health problems, someone who has gone through the participation groups, done the apprenticeships, and now works on the team. And I think that's something really special.
Definitely.
Yeah.
It's really lovely to hear. And I think it's the kind of thing that really bears repeating, it bears highlighting, because it is a real success story. And as I say, I think from if I speak as the representative of parent carers, a lot of us, when we find out that our child has a disability or an additional need, that first question is, what's going to happen to them? And I found as my children have grown up and become teenagers, there is that, you know, am I ever going to be able to have a job? Am I ever going to be able to move out? Because if I'm not well enough to earn enough money to pay the rent, how do I do it? And so actually it becomes so important to see people with disabilities in work and see the impact that they're making. And I think particularly in the kind of work that you're doing, which it's perpetuating that accessibility and that visibility of the fact that everybody, we're just people. And we should all have access to the same kind of life. I'm going to slightly promote the video that came out with Peter Bates. I don't know if you haven't had a chance to watch it from yesterday or the day before, I've lost track. He blew my mind actually with what he was talking about inclusion, the fact that we should all be able to do the same thing as everybody else, and we shouldn't have to fill out a 25-page risk assessment just to leave our homes.
A lot of the time, I think disability is kind of pushed onto us by the way that society has made things. It's a choice that has been made somewhere, and that choice just needs to be made differently now. You know, I think the more and more that we promote people's voices, I think the excuse that people aren't just aware of it is, you know, less able to be used. So
brilliant. So I know when we get together, kind of more strategically, Family Voice and the UVP, we often find that we start off talking about lots of different things, and we often end up at one or two or three issues that clearly are affecting our community. And one of them is the issue of young people who are really struggling to get to school and to access education in, not even in a mainstream setting, but even in a special school setting. It just isn't working. And it's something that it's difficult because when you speak to council officers, it feels like quite a small problem sometimes. When we speak to young people and parent carers, it feels like a really big problem. And I think that, Gemma, is part of the work you've been doing on this alternative provision review, and it's something Family Voice have been involved in, not as much as we'd like yet, because there's been other stuff that's made noise, and it's really good to hear that you've been involved with it. And I know we're due to work together to make sure that congruence of representation happens. Can I let you tell us more about the consultation, Gemma?
Yeah, so we were asked by the Alternative Learning and Participation team basically to get feedback from children, young people, parents and carers about their views on alternative learning provision. Obviously across Surrey, we have a real wide range of alternative learning provision, whether that be pupil referral units, access to education, the alternative learning programme. There's a whole wide range. So we wanted to get young people's understanding of what was their experience of alternative learning provision. Did they enjoy it? What would they have changed? And similarly for parents and carers, what was the communication like between the child's kind of main school and the local authority and the alternative learning provider? It's to help inform the alternative learning provision strategy, which is being redesigned currently. So again, it's just a really great example. We were really pleased that the team came to us and said, you know, we want to reach out and we want to hear what have young people got to say about it, what have young parents and carers got to say about it, because really, unless we get their views, we're not going to get it right, kind of thing. So we need to be listening. So I worked with the team to, you know, create a number of questions for children and young people. I think we've had nearing on 70 responses in total at the moment, which is, we're really pleased. So it's open now until the 17th of November, so we've extended it by a week. I would have liked a bit more time. It was one of those kind of, this is the deadline and this is when it needs to be done by. I think going forward, I would kind of urge teams to be giving us more notice, because I think something like that is something that, you know, people really want to think about. And some of the questions in the survey, particularly at the end, was, you know, if you would mind sharing your experience. And, you know, some of the responses we've got have been fantastic. You know, people have written kind of essays worth, which is fantastic for us, because that's what we need. We need to hear.
Can I ask, Gemma, I have filled out the the survey, and it's one we've been promoting and will be promoting in the next few days in all of our Facebook groups. So if you're listening and this is in any way relevant to you, please go ahead and fill it out. Gemma, can I ask you, I found it really difficult to answer the survey in some respects, and I will just share my personal experience because it might help you understand. So my daughter came out of school following difficulties with mental health. She had been in a specialist placement. We were told we couldn't access A2E for some kind of strange criteria. That's not uncommon. I can tell you that straight away from a parent carer perspective. I was very fortunate in that I'm really lucky to have 3 young people with SEND, so I have quite a lot of experience in the system. And what we did, because of the complexity of her need, is I requested a personal budget, and we managed to get something in place that I administered, which is all fine and well if you've got a parent who's capable of doing that, if you've got a case officer who's open enough, if the manager understands. There's a lot of ifs. Because it was on a personal budget, it was difficult to answer your questions because I didn't have an alternative provision provider as such.
Right, okay, yeah.
So I wondered if we have parents who've got experience of accessing education differently, would they be able to maybe contact you directly to feed in?
Yeah, most definitely. Yeah, I'm very happy for that to.
And you know, I know that Zoom gives us names, and you've got both of your names. Is your email address?
I can share. Yeah, I can share my email address. Yeah, that's not a problem at all.
So presumably it's gemma.neathie@surreycc.gov.uk.
Yeah, exactly.
I think, you know, what I'm hearing a lot from your team is that you want to hear these stories, and I would absolutely recommend and encourage any parents who've got these. We hear these stories all the time. We can certainly have a look and give you the themes that we've had on this thing. And I know we will be working more strategically together. But yeah, really, really important, I think, it's a strange world, the alternative education one, isn't it?
It's such a tricky one, and trying to come up with the questions, to be honest, it was a challenge because it is so wide ranging. Like you say, it could be a personal budget where you're delivering something yourself, or it could be, you know, a program that's kind of well established. So it was a very tricky one to do. But yeah, most certainly we would welcome any feedback that, you know, you're.
And I don't know about your experience. Certainly in the experience that we tend to hear is parents have no idea that there's an alternative learning provision at all, that it exists, let alone what might be available. So we, you know, one of the alternative providers that we hear quite a lot of really good things is, I want to say, is it the Elysian? They work with animals, I think horses in particular.
Okay.
Elysium.
Yes, that's the one, Elysium. I know that there are lots of things, but in terms of actually where do you find out about these things? It feels almost as though if we tell people that that's out there, we might get flooded with requests. It's really difficult, isn't it, Sabrina?
It is,
I would just like to highlight that there is actually a SEND local offer website, which Scias has given their feedback on recently on their website, and been working with Michael Pipe and Gary King to bring that about.
Yes, we have to.
All sorts of things. And also, if you find any accessibility problems with that website, just get in touch with them. They're really keen to make sure that that website meets as many needs as possible, and they're very open to discussion. So
brilliant, fabulous. I find myself going ... Yeah, I'm losing. Sabrina, go talk. Tell me stuff. Ask me a question.
I guess what I'd really like to know from the people watching is, what does participation mean to you? How, like, do you hear like participation group, and do you know what that would involve from you and from us? Like, do you need to know more about what participation is? And I guess, because from my perspective, that is something I'm working a lot on at the moment, is what does participation mean to you? We recently asked SYAS themselves, and for them it was about making friends and gaining confidence, and the couple in particular said that they didn't just make friends from SYAS, but being involved in this work has increased their confidence. So they've made friends outside of SYAS as well. So for us, it's all about that personal development as well as the as well as us getting services to listen to you, it's also about building you up as a person. And we certainly always trying to think of new ideas and take ideas from the young people for activities and events and training. For example, Scias are very interested in sign language at the moment. So we are doing Makaton training in quite a lot of our sessions. One of our SYAS leads, Rachel Hale, who unfortunately couldn't join us today, she uses Makaton with her son. So she has been teaching the group and they're absolutely loving it. We're hoping to get some British Sign Language training. I've done very minimal amount before, but definitely want to be getting accredited for that. And we're planning to do some sign language Christmas carols and things like that. So yeah, the group feedback to us, you know, these are the skills that we want. And that is part of it as well, you know. It's not just sitting there moaning about everything that is a barrier to you in Surrey. It's also about, you know, where do you see yourself in the future? How can we help you get there?
It's really interesting because that what you're talking about mirrors exactly the conversations that we've had at Family Voice and talking to parent carers and saying, what is it that you need? And what I don't think we've put it as clearly maybe as what does participation mean and this is what it might mean, but that give and take of it's not okay just to take stuff from people, even if it's only information and experience. It's actually really important to say, well, where's that the feedback, and what is it that we can do to help you make your life a little bit better, whilst not being a support group as such. It's a really interesting conversation, isn't it? And trying to help, I suppose, help engender and foster enough trust that people feel comfortable sharing their experience and their stories. Or just less stressed. You know, if you can remove the stress and the anxiety, then you allow people to say, okay, I'm thinking about another talk. I was a psychotherapist who did a talk the other day was talking about that green emotional zone where you feel just right and you're actually able to talk. If you're in the orange or the red zone, you just can't, or in the blue, and you're just exhausted. So it's really important, isn't it, to build people up, because that then allows them to share and to engage as well.
Yeah, most definitely.
It's such an incredible
as a two-way process, isn't it?
I think it's so important to empower the young people that we work with, both in terms of and to follow them in how they wish to, you know, empower themselves, because really they know how to do so best. And, you know, I find that disability is, as well as being something that I have been given to deal with, it's something that I identify with, because there is so much, you know, there's so much thought and so much culture around so many disabled people. So for example, the deaf community has such an incredible culture, so rich and so independent of, you know, the hearing world, which I think is absolutely fantastic. And, you know, they're very good to, and I'd love to see, you know, the autistic community or other similar communities following their footsteps, because it's so, you know, you don't have to view your disability as something that limits you. You can view it as something that empowers you and something that is part of you. And, you know, as someone who's visibly disabled, who uses mobility aids, when I leave the house, I'm making a statement. And I would rather that I wasn't. You know, it'd be quite nice to opt out of that. But I find that celebrating my disability, even in the pain and the difficulty that it causes me, is such an invaluable way. And for my mental health, actually, it's fantastic, because it can be so disheartening. And you mentioned earlier about young people wanting to go out and work, and my sister, she wanted so desperately to go and work, and she couldn't. And, you know, it was a horrible thing for her, and really contributed to her mental health decline. And, you know, but there's so many young people who have disabilities who want to go out and work. And I know that especially as they get older and they hit kind of 18 and want to go out and work, they're faced with people saying, oh, wouldn't it be lovely to sit at home all the time? And wouldn't it be lovely to not have to work? And, you know, with lockdown, I think people are slowly beginning to empathise because it's not fun to be stuck inside the house. And so many young people want to go out and work. And, you know, and actually it's incredibly disheartening to not be able to. And
Yes.
especially in the society that we live in, where work and contributing, work is viewed as the way that you contribute to society. And it's not the only way to be, and it's not the only way to contribute. And I think it's so important to remember that we can be valuable and valuable and important members of society without working, because it's wonderful to work, of course, when we can. But for some young people, that shouldn't be the goal. And happiness and independence in their own way, not having to be independent as in being self-sufficient, because for so many young people with SEND needs, that's not the goal, and it shouldn't be, because happiness is so much more than just, go like, oh, well, I can use the washing machine by myself, so I'm happy now and I'm independent. But that's not everything, and it can be so disheartening as a young person with SEND needs to not be able to do those things for yourself. And I still really, really struggle with that. My mum still needs to help me, and she's got, and me and both of my siblings are autistic and have extra needs. So I'm sure my mum would very much empathise with you, Benedict.
Yes.
It's not a fun job. And she's mentioned a lot about how hard it has been for her having to, because the burden very often falls onto parents and carers now. And I grew up in the care system because, partially because there was no support for my mum, and I wasn't taken into care from her. I was taken into care from my father, but I couldn't return them because my sister was so unwell, and my mum was getting no support. And so for me, I'm actually very glad of living in the care system, because it gave me the independent skills that I needed for myself. But actually, it's been very hard for me adjusting to the fact that I will probably never be able to be fully independent, and I will always need other people in my life to support me, because no matter how hard I try, I will always be disabled and I will always need support. And I'm having to come to terms with that personally, and that can be so incredibly difficult. And I imagine so many young people struggle with it. And also for parents and carers, the way that you grow up and you have these expectations of your child, and when that child isn't going to go the way that you would expect it to, it can be so painful for parents and carers. And I really empathise with them, because it's not easy, and it is such, it is an extra job. And I think so many people go, oh, well, it's so I don't think I could do that. And it's like, but you're not given a choice.
Exactly. It's life, isn't it? And I think one of the things that I'm in journeying alongside my children, which I increasingly, as they're getting older, I see it as that, because the youngest is 17 now. They're cooked. I've done my parenting job, and now I need to be almost their companion. And it's trying to redefine independence. And in my world, independence meant you went to school, you went to university, you got a job, you got your own place to live, and then you did everything on your own. And that's not what we're talking about, is it? It's how do you maintain part of your life that your parents don't know about? And actually you can do that living at home, and what is it about that fulfills you, that gives you that sense of joy, that sense of purpose? I find one of the things that I find really difficult is that we very often, with young people who have a disability, we will say, well, you can volunteer, thinking, but actually, it makes perfect sense. My 18-year-old doesn't want to volunteer. She wants some money so that she can spend money in charity shops with hundreds and hundreds of different clothes every single day. but actually, we too easily push disabled young people into volunteering. And that, I don't think it's as a parent carer. I look at my children, but as disabled young adults, and I think, well, if I were in their shoes, I'd be saying, well, no, actually, go away. I want to work so that I can earn some money, so that I can do my things. And I think listening to you, Rowan, it's really empowering. And I know I've already had a number of comments loving Rowan. And I suspect one of the reasons is that a lot of the people who are watching us now are going to be going, yes, this is my daughter, this is my son. I can see all of this amazing potential, and this is a human being in their own right. And who are we to put barriers in front of you?
Because because disabled people are people. And I can really understand with your daughter wanting to work, because actually, and there's so many different schemes, so especially with people with more severe disabilities or who have learning difficulties, being sent to jobs and paid less.
Yes.
And that can be so frustrating, because you're doing the same work and you should be empowered in that way. Disabled labour is still labour and deserves to be respected as such. I think it's really interesting how you bring up the point about redefining, because I think that's such an important point and very topical considering the alternative learning provisions that we're talking about. You know, education is so often seen as, you know, you go to school and you do this, and I accessed an ALP in my kind of last year of school because of my mental health. I attended the Hope Service, which saved my life. You know, the Hope Service absolutely definitively saved my life with the work that they did. And my younger brother is now at a specialist school, which we had to fight very, very hard to get him in. And I'm sure there are many, many other families in that exact same position, because the school that was originally offered to him wasn't suitable for his needs. And he was very, very anxious about going to school. You know, he didn't want to go, and I was a school refuser when I was younger. And so I really, really empathise with that, you know, and school is not always the right environment, you know, mainstream school certainly. And, you know, it's so important to redefine how we think about education, how we think about children learning. It shouldn't be a situation in which children forced in and they should learn about maths and English and their GCSEs, which, you know, I was very good at, but that shouldn't have been, but that's not right for everybody. And there is so much more to a young person than whether they have that English or maths skill, because you know what, if they're happy, it doesn't matter. And if that young person has got their maths and English GCSE, but their emotional state is absolutely ruined, then I think I'd know which one I would pick.
Yeah, it's really interesting what you say, actually, Rowan, because I'm going to be talking live at 4:30 to Eamon Gilbert from Surrey County Council, and his presentation talked absolutely about the fact that because of the way the system works, it's really important that we use the resources of an education, health and care plan to build the skills that young person will need for their adulthood. And that's not necessarily going to be maths and English and history and geography, is it? Sorry, I've just had some questions come in. I like this one. Can you tell us how you were involved in the PFA programme launch of the first year and the Next Steps brands mentioned in Eamon's presentation? Were any of you in? Well, I know you're all quite new. So Eamon talked about the fact that SYAS were involved in some focus groups and branding of the Next Steps programme.
Yes, Next Steps programme is something I'm moving into now. It will become more of my responsibility. But yes, SCC were very heavily involved in Next Steps, and we continue to do a lot of work on post-16 transition. And I think actually Rowan was one of the people who mentioned something very important. She's like, we were doing this like years ago, why has nothing changed? You're like, why are we still discussing?
I joined SIA 6 years ago roughly, and it was a discussion that was being had then, and it's still one that is being had now, which I think isn't good enough, but it doesn't surprise me, and I wish it did. SIA is what our CAMS participation group, so child and adolescent mental health services. We have a number of participation groups, and actually many of our young people attend multiple groups. It's just a space to allow them to talk about themes that they may not get to discuss outside of those groups, or may not be able to talk to people who understand.
So I'm intrigued, because obviously in my role at Family Voice, I get to have conversations in different parts as well. And I know that one of the other speakers that we've had this week have been Surrey Choices, and they were involved with Eamon Gilbert in putting together, I think the programme is called Future Choices, which had its pilot last year. I don't know if you were involved in that, but I know it seems to have gone very, very well and is expanding this year. So I suppose what I wanted to say, Rowan, in response to is, you're right, these conversations have been going on a long time. I get the sense that there might be a little bit of shift into actually things happening. Does that resonate with you?
Yes, no, I would agree. I have seen movement happen, and it's really wonderful, and it's quite nice to see that participation is having that impact, because I mean, I remember I was there when, I mean, this is quite specific, but when SABP came in to take over CAMS, I was there at that kind of initial drive meeting. I remember looking at that big board that they had of all these ideas, and it's very surreal to me, about 4 years later, or however long it's been, looking back and seeing those ideas having been implemented. Some of them being ideas that I brought up at that meeting and fed back on. So it's very surreal to see the real life tangible impact that participation has, because it does have one.
We always take the work back to Scias as well. So at every stage we're saying, like, this is what's happened now, and keeping them updated. And this is something I'm really working on, is making the work that we do behind the scenes as transparent as possible. So the newsletter's not great yet. We're working on it. There's going to be newsletters. We're going to have monthly podcasts that cover the themes that are raised in groups. We're going to be sharing direct quotes, anonymized, from our young people, and just really being very open about progress and giving public feedback, publicly available feedback to our young people on the things that they've asked for. And so, for example, with Next Steps, we recently, they released some brochures. Well, Scias had a say in, you know, the way brochures needed to look, the way they needed to be designed, how to make them more accessible. And I think something, the Next Steps brochure currently has an easy read version and a non-easy read version. But I think something Scias are really trying to push forward with that is that why can't everything be easy to read?
Yes.
Why can't everything just be accessible as the norm? Why does there have to be two different versions? And I think that's something that's really starting to come out from Scias, and we're going to be pushing for.
Great. I'm going to move on to my questions. Thank you. I think what you touched on this, Sabrina, earlier, but just to be clear, the next question is, how do you become a member of Scias, and what's the membership criteria?
So membership criteria is simply, if you are a young person with SEND living in Surrey, you are welcome.
Wonderful.
And actually, in general, if you access any Surrey services, so for example, you could be a young person that's now at university, but you grew up in Surrey, or your parents are in Surrey, or you spend some of your time in Surrey accessing services here, you are welcome. So we have some people now at university all across the country. They still come to group, they still interact with us and talk to us and get involved in our events and producing material for the group. So to get involved with Scias, you can either email us at user.voice@surreycc.gov.uk. You can go onto the Scias website and get more contact information there for our social media and get in touch. You can email me directly, like literally any member of the UVP team will get you involved in Scias.
Yes.
When you've declared your interest, we need you to fill in a health and safety form. This is just so that we know what needs we need to be accommodating, and making sure that, you know, if anything comes up, for example, when we go back to face-to-face groups, we need to know if you're allergic to certain things. We need to know your emergency contact details if something happens, because with Scias, there's kind of, the groups usually encourage young people to be there independently. So at the beginning, we encourage parents to come along if the young person wants that. And what we try and work towards is making that an environment where the young person can come to independently if that's what they want. And then we also want to create a second environment for people where that is not possible but still want to get involved. And that can either be, at the moment, via email, telephone, social media, text messaging. We're hoping to also start a WhatsApp group. We just need to check all the health and safety forms, where each week we can post, like, this is a theme that we're going to be discussing this week. Do you want to talk about it in here? Sort of thing. And
We
moving
also have the
forward,
consultation packs, don't we? Which
Yeah.
is quite good. Yeah.
Thank you. Yeah, we've introduced consultation packs, which are available on the Scias website. Every week is trying to improve their accessibility, and if anyone needs those packs provided in a different format, just get in contact, let us know, we can provide that. We'll do whatever we can to make sure that our work is accessible, and also the feedback of the young people is accessible to you as well. I think also when moving forward, we're trying to make more groups, more ways for people to get involved. I think I might have already mentioned, you know, siblings, carers.
Yes.
We're trying to open up Scias, and Scias will be renamed eventually. But essentially, if you have an SEND need, if you care for someone with an SEND need, we want to hear from you. We would love you to be involved with the work that we're doing, and also in personal development as well.
Yes.
Great.
And I can attest, as someone who attended Scias for quite a long time, literally since the beginning. They couldn't get rid of me. They so couldn't get rid of me that they hired me. So, but honestly, there is, and I mean this genuinely, there is a lot of support there, and the staff members care about making sure that young people do access it. And I experienced that firsthand as a person who, who was working as a young person with them, and now as a professional working with them. I see the passion that so many of our team members, are pretty much all of them, I don't think I can think of one team member that isn't genuinely passionate about the work that they do, and we genuinely do care and want to hear these voices because they are so valuable and so important to us, both personally because we care and professionally because we think it's so important. We genuinely do want to make these changes, so come, because we want to see that, and we want to hear what you have to say.
And a lot of us experience these difficulties day to day as well.
Yeah.
So I think that the next question is kind of perfect. And part two is how you ensure you're representative of all the SEND youth community, but including those with physical, visual impairment, learning needs. But I think you've covered a lot of that. And it seems that the biggest thing is for those young people to let you know what their needs are, and then you accommodate.
Yeah.
The big thing really, I think, that is the question in there is who makes up the SCC team? How many members of staff do you have? And
so currently we have myself as the SEND participation officer. Rachel Hale is actually a child's rights advocate, and she leads a lot of the group. So she is usually present in every group session. You'll see her. I pop in and out. But what we're going to be doing going forward is providing monthly schedules of which staff will be in each group, so that the young people are aware if any changes are going to happen in advance, and also know who they're going to be seeing when they get there. Currently at the moment, we've been telling them when we do like a recruitment each week, we get in contact, catch up with the young people, what you've been up to, etc., and say, oh, this week we're going to be doing this and this person's going to be here. But we really want to make it just more accessible in general and get posts out there. So this is what's going to be happening hopefully from next week. We also have an apprentice called Holly Kirtley. Until next week is his last week, we have another apprentice called Dominic, who has been with Scias for a long time, and we're very sad to see him go. We'll be having a little leaving party, but he's very interested to keep in touch with Scias and see what's going on and keep up with the young people. I mean, a lot of the group he's worked with one-on-one for years, so that's very difficult for him. And we also have a member of the care team who's a bank worker who has her own SEND needs, who wants to come over and help as well. She's been coming to sessions for a few weeks. The young people have built a great rapport with her. So we're growing, we're getting there.
Sounds really good. Can I ask you, when you do meet in the real world, is that in one location in Surrey, and where is it, or do you have various places? So
previously we had 2 locations, one in Epsom and one in Woking. And obviously we make sure that it's an accessible room. I think I was being told of the first time that Scias got a room booked for them, and there were steps to get into the room. And Gina, who was leading it at the time, just was
not happy,
so angry, and sorted it out. You know, it's just simple things like that. But we've been around for a long time now. We're on it. We're not going to allow situations like that to go ahead.
And, I have physical accessibility needs, so they do have to, because otherwise I can't come, and I will complain if I cannot come. So we do ensure, and we are quite careful. We can compensate travel if that's a problem for anyone, and we will provide any support that we can do. If someone wants to come and is struggling with it, we will do everything that is within our power as a team to ensure that young people are able to attend, because we really do want them there.
We also run like residential events and day trips, and obviously we make sure those are accessible as well. I think, for example, recently we've done like accessible rock climbing and all sorts of like fun activities for many of our young people, and we're always looking for ideas from the young people, like what would you like to do, and then we try and facilitate that and make sure that they can do that. At the moment, we've got virtual sessions, and when we go back to face-to-face, we're looking to continue the virtual sessions once a month, because the young people have said, we want this, like on days where we can't leave the house. This is really great for us. So we're going to do that. We also, with Scias, I think we enjoy that regular contact. I think for a lot of our young people, it gives routine and a friendly face that they can check in with regularly. A lot of them experience, bullying or quite unpleasant situations in their day-to-day lives, and we are just that face. It's like, we care,
It's that connection, isn't it?
Yeah.
The next question, I like this, it's probably going to prompt conversation. Are you like Family Voice, but for young people rather than their whole family or parents?
I think, yeah, I think it's, we do also have a group called, so there's a parents and carers group that is run by one of our members of staff, Georgia, as well. And that's again for any parents to join that whose children and young people access any services across Surrey, so not necessarily send specific, you know.
I understood that that one was particularly for those parents whose children accessed CAMS. Has that changed recently, or?
Yeah, it's for any of the kind of services across Surrey, not necessarily just CAMS. At the moment, they're not meeting officially each month or anything. I think through lockdown, parents weren't getting on so well with the kind of virtual meetings, and so at the moment, a lot of what they're doing is through social media, engaging with parents that way. But we do have a parents and carers Facebook page as well. So. But yeah, primarily we are, I guess, about getting young people's voices. Hence
definitely moving forward. And I think what is different about the SEND side of the team to the other members of the team is obviously parent and carers play such an important role in everything that we do. We have really good relationships with parents. Like the other day, one of our young people was on and his mum was also there, so we all joined in, you know, and talking to her as well. And we talk to parents often check in with us and come to us and highlight issues that they're facing. You know, we're really open to hearing those perspectives about young, like if it involves your young people, we want to know.
Yeah.
You know,
so if I can kind of take the Family Voice side of that, I think there's a lot of overlap with what we do. One of the really big differences is that you're part of the county council and we're independent, and that clearly is a difference. One of the things that I know we spoke, I can't remember if it was Georgia I was speaking to or someone else in the team, but one of the things is as a parent there can be some misunderstandings. So we know that one parent was a Family Voice member, and in her head it was for one of her children who had quite complex needs, but she had felt that we only represented families with really complex needs. And so she'd found out about the Packer group, I think through the CAMS thing, for her other child. And I think one of the things that we're trying to do working together is to make sure that we know what we're doing. So actually we would represent her for both children. We have, I think probably the Packer group does a slightly different support groupy thing for those things. Some of it is actually, if you found a group of people that you're getting on with and you're talking to, that's what matters. I think we tend to try and encourage, between the two organisations, we encourage membership where it suits. And certainly, I think any parent carers, if they can join Family Voice, it gives strength to that independent voice, which can be really helpful sometimes. But I think one of the key messages is for parent carers to know that if we are talking and making sure that there is that representation is consistent, so that there isn't, what we don't want to do is for big nameless bodies to say, oh, well, we're getting two different messages and this one suits us better, so we'll listen to that one. And I think by talking together and making sure that we are getting all of the messages, and that includes organisations like Send Advice Surrey, who get another view of things, we need to make sure that that is consistent and that we are promoting what the others do.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, definitely. And I think our action card systems are really useful for that as well. Yeah, I think.
Can you explain a little bit more about those? Because we're starting a slightly separate but similar action card system with Surrey County Council ourselves. But tell us.
Yeah, and I wanted to talk to you about that actually. I think we should have maybe monthly meetings to discuss
Yes.
things that are coming up.
It's in the diary to do.
Yes, so we have a system where we have action cards, question cards, and alert cards. So alert cards might be something that a young person has brought up in group, but maybe not many people mentioned it, but it's, you know, something still very important. We'll make a note of it and we'll have a time limit deadline where we have to get back and answer those questions, that alert. question cards, again, it might not be too many people in group, but our members have raised a really important question about services or how to access certain amounts of help, or said, oh, we're not able to get information from this body for some reason. Can you look into that for us, sort of thing. Action cards are where 4 or more of our young people, that can either be in group or maybe 2 from group, 2 in an email, but however they want to give their feedback, say this is a problem. We raise it as an action card. We then take it to, so it'll come in different themes. For example, a recent one we had was our young people wanted to have action cards for the LGBTQ plus community and to have more posts about that, and to have support for our members who are in that community. So we discuss it as a team. What are our team going to do? We take it to Surrey and we ask them, what are you doing about this? And then we bring all that back to our young people. So for our cases, we now have a system for raising action cards that are LGBTQ plus related. We're going to have, I think it's 2 posts a month, at least 2 posts a month have to be about LGBTQ plus community, like news or themes or things that are going on there. And we're also talking about introducing like rainbow lanyards and pin badges that show support or training that we've had. So for example, Rowan raised a really good point about pronoun badges. It's not just about sharing our pronouns, but showing that we're a safe space for people to talk to about their pronouns or any other issues that they're facing in relation to that. Because if you go to a member of the council and they're just wearing a plain badge, you don't know who they are. You don't know if you talk to them, if you're going to get discriminated against, because, you know, that's what you face day to day. And we really want to be more visible about that. And that's what Scias asked of us as well. And we've done that. And that is going to happen.
Great.
So
fantastic. I'm aware we've been talking for a long time. I have one other question that feels like it's a nice kind of maybe place to round up. It's one question, but with a bit of background. So do you go into schools to talk about disability? And this parent says, although I find my son's stereotypical school pretty good, kids will be kids, and my son gets upset that others, due to age and lack of understanding, will say, oh, you're so autistic, as a general insult, not necessarily to him, but just that it's not direct discrimination, but it perpetuates negative stereotypes.
This has come up in our groups a lot recently. The young people are discussing it a lot, and we have raised an action card on it actually.
Great.
So obviously I have joined the team during COVID. I personally have not been into schools yet, but we do work alongside schools. So this comes in at many different forms. For instance, one of our members might want us to advocate for them. So they've had a problem at school, and we speak on their behalf and go to the school and say, you know, you're not providing presentations in a SEND formally way. Could you please do this? On stuff like that, and the school come back to us with what they're going to do. The young person then feeds back to us whether or not that's happened. And we are there for them to support them to get their needs.
So you're able to do some amount of individual advocacy, are you?
We are. And we also recommend Rowan, do you know the name of it? The words are escaping me. Huh?
The foreign voice.
Foreign voice, as an advocacy way as well. We also, so actually, Rowan, again, has been putting together a great database of schools for us that we're going to get in contact with who have SENCOs or SEN departments.
There's a list, quite a few schools have, if you look on kind of the Surrey CC directory, there are schools which have specialist SEN provisions. And so we're making sure that we focus on those schools specifically, as well as schools which are specialists, to make sure that we get voices of young people from, you know, a lot of these specialist SEN provision schools, so they're mainstream, but sometimes I'll have like, I can't remember, a coin.
A unit, So I think it's still used, but certainly the traditional thing was a school with a unit attached.
Yes, exactly.
Yes, we're starting here, and we're trying to build a community of people that want to work with us, and they're young people to come to us as well. And so we're starting with the SEN provision and trying to, you know, get young people's voice heard in the provision that they're getting at school, and kind of build some consistency. I don't think it's very just that if you go to a different school, you might get such a different experience that affects your future.
Yeah,
like
Absolutely. That's what we all really want, isn't it? Is to be able to, you shouldn't need to go and look at loads of school to pick the one that is right, because the one that's there should be offering.
and especially with young people with SEND needs, especially if they have to access specialist schools, there can be literal fights that go on between them and the councils to try and make sure that child gets the right provision. And you know, school is such a massive part of a young person's life. They are there 6 hours a day, you know, 5 days a week, unless they have alternative provisions. And so it's so important that we make sure that schools are a healthy and positive place for young people to be in. And you know, I remember that when I was school refusing, when I was in year 6, I would be really lovely at school, and then I would come home and I was a nightmare. And that's, you know, I was a bit of a nightmare. And so I know that there's a lot of young people who will go to school and they will keep it all kind of locked inside because they don't feel safe at school, and then they will come home and let it all out.
Yeah. And I would, you know, as a mum, Rowan, I would say your language isn't right. You weren't a nightmare. You just couldn't control it anymore and you were in distress. And that's what happens. It's not a choice, is it?
No,
you don't choose. To
I was also quite an annoying child in my own right, regardless of my
I'd also say travel as well. Transport. If you have to travel really far for school, and you only have a certain number of spoons a day, how many do you need to reach your education, which is a right that you have?
And that was.
I'm going to give everybody here a bit of homework when they leave us. Is go and look up the spoons theory for chronic illness. In our house, we talk about spoons an awful lot, and I'm not going to say any more about that. I'm going to make people go and look.
It's so helpful, and I find, going back to some of what Rowan said earlier about coming to a level of acceptance as being very important, spoon theory for me was so helpful in that process to really set myself realistic expectations. So yeah, I really recommend it.
And the last thing, sorry, go ahead, Bella.
I was just going to change the subject quickly back to the education thing. The last thing is with schools is often our young people ask for more information to be shared in schools on different topics. And not only do we pass that back to the Surrey Council, but sometimes we make our own media, if that makes sense, and share that with the school. That could be videos, posters, case studies, blogs, and hopefully a podcast as well. So, and we all want that to be shared in schools. And I think also because we offer the chance for our young people to be anonymous, that's a way for them to see real change happening in their school and see, you know, I said that and now that's happening here. You know, I think it's really powerful.
That's what we want out of participation, actually, isn't it? Is to be able to see the change that we've instigated.
Yeah, it's not just a token. We're not just saying it. We're actually doing it.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
That sounds like a perfect place to finish off, doesn't it? Thank you so much. I know we could go on talking for hours, couldn't we? I think there's so much to talk about. I'm really grateful that you came and spent some time with us, and I'm sure that we will have all of this event has shown us that actually there is a real thirst for that engagement, and it's finding the different ways to trigger that conversation with people. So I think this is going to be a springboard rather than just a fixed event. And definitely. If you want to get in contact with me, anyone that's watching or any of our team, it doesn't have to be just this week. When like we said before, we're not asking you to make space for us. You come to us when you need us, and we will make space for you, if that makes sense. You know, we're here for you. We're here to advocate for you, to raise your voices and the voices of your young people. So please just get in contact with us.
Definitely.
Thank you ever so much.
Thank you for having us.